Now into its 5th year, the Star Garage Boconnoc stages once again attracted a full entry and brought motorsport well and truly to the spectators with its unique and picturesque stages located in these private grounds. Before we head to the stages, let's take a look at the top of the entry list and a look at what we can look forward to this weekend. Martin Waters heads the cruise away, looking for another win, with Steve Fursland looking to make sure the trophy has his name on it once again. And Kevin Tappin will be back for another giant-killing performance, or so he hoped, in 3rd. 12 stages lie ahead of the cruise, with 3 loops of 4 before heading into service. So let's get on with the action on the first of those stages. No problems to report over the first loop for Martin Waters and Ben Purnell. They lead the way, and with a small advantage of 6 seconds. The shorter stages on this kind of rally mean there aren't a great deal of places where time can be made up, but it was all too easy to lose it if you did make a mistake. For Steve and Yvonne Fursland, it will be 2nd. They were close to the lead, which of course is where they had their sights well and truly set. But for this loop, they would have to settle for that 2nd place and get ready for a push in the next few stages. Richard Fishley and Ian Edwards make a good start, leading the way in Class C. The lead in that class only a small 1 second advantage, but 3rd place overall was theirs too. And just behind them in the class and overall positions were Kevin and Charles Tappin. Not at the top of the results where they would have hoped, but things were still going well with the lead still in their sights, even if that would mean a big push. Things were close right through the Class C podium at this stage. Mike Raymond and Scott Smith taking 3rd in the class behind Tappin, and they were just 3 seconds back in that place. For Danielle Fursland and Holly Creamer, the times would be a little further apart, but they were still going well. 6th place for now, 2nd in Class E. Meanwhile, 3rd in that class and just 7 seconds back from Fursland would be Graham Roberts and Bradley Down. They would settle in well to the first few stages and they would be ready for a push in the next loop. And just behind them in the class were Richard Barrow and Andrew Richards, just a single second between them at this stage, so it was all to play for after service. 2 seconds back overall in 9th place were Anton Shaw and Robert Crook. They were not in the same class, fighting instead in Class D, where they were 2nd, but they would still be looking to push in the next few stages. And rounding out our top 10 at this stage were Ed Lambert and Gareth Drayton. They have a good run this morning to lead the way in Class A with that position. Just to take a look at some of the classes outside of the top 10, and it will be 3rd place in Class D for Sam Perring and Amy Fergus in the BMW, just 10 seconds off their nearest class rival. It wouldn't be 10 seconds in the other direction though, with 4th place in the class belonging to Chris White and Jason Harris, lying just 3 seconds back from Perring in that position. Phil and David Garnett get the best start in Class B with a lead in that class after stage 4. It wouldn't be a massive one, but they do have a small advantage at the top of the class, which is important after the first loop, of course. And for David Peters and Roger Partridge, it will be 5th place in Class E. Only a matter of seconds from the top 10, but a bit more needed to reach the next place in their class. Martin Masters and Stephen Spear end this loop with 4th in Class C. They would be almost a minute off the top of the class, but they were in a fight to keep hold of their 4th place. They had Jeff Denford and Brian Sanford breathing down their necks going into service, with 5th place in the class, just a single second back from Masters at this stage. Derek Bly and Nigel Barnett make a good start to the event with 2nd place in Class B. They will be 12 seconds back from the class lead though in 17th overall. And 2nd place in Class A were Phil Harris and Sean Leyland. It was going to be a tall order to catch the class leaders up in 10th overall, but they had a good advantage of their own in 2nd. Matt Wheeler and Alex Hawkins, meanwhile, reach the end of this stage with third in Class B. They have a good advantage in that place too. And it will be a similar story for Pete Coles and Sam Treleaven. Third in Class A, their advantage not quite as big in that position, but an advantage it was nonetheless. Fourth in that class with 8 seconds between themselves and the car ahead were Wayne Menenit and Michael Dennis, lying in 28th overall at this stage too. In Class B, it will be 4th place for David Thorpe and Ian Druitt. They lie in 32nd overall at this stage. And rounding off the top of the Class A with 5th in the class were Jay Thorne and Mark Verin in the Ford Anglia. They will be a couple of places overall ahead of the Proton of Adam Mayle and Steve Watts. They take 5th place in Class B. And for Joe Geach and Ben Ignazik, it will be 5th place in Class D, some way off the top of the class in 41st place on the leaderboard. So at the end of the first loop of stages, the results at the top look like this. On to the next loop of stages, and there will be no change in the lead, as we see Martin Waters and Ben Purnell extend that advantage, in fact, now to 23 seconds. There would, however, be change in second place. Richard Fishley and Ian Edwards taking that position now and leading the way in Class C, still at this stage. So for Steve and Yvonne Fursland, it will be a drop down to third. The times were actually the same for second and third, but their run one time will be where they were losing out on this tiebreak. Unfortunately, we'd lose Kevin and Charles Tappin from their good run in Stage 5. No giant killing performance from them today. This does mean that Mike Raymond and Scott Smith will be 4th place now. They were almost 20 seconds off the podium positions though, and lying second in their class. Danielle Fursland and Holly Creamer, meanwhile, were still having a good run, lying in 5th place overall and 2nd in class in that Impreza. Just behind in the class, with 7 seconds of a gap between them, were Graham Roberts and Bradley Down. They were still going well, with 6th place overall too. For Richard Barrow and Andrew Richards, it will be 4th place in Class E. They were just 3 seconds back from Roberts and lying in 7th place on the leaderboard. Ed Lambert and Gareth Drayton, meanwhile, moved their way up the overall results into 8th. There was no improvement on the class, though. They already had the lead in Class A. And for Sam Perring and Amy Fergus, it will be 2nd in Class D, moving up the class results and the overall leaderboard at this stage and lying in 9th place now. So rounding out the top 10 were Martin Masters and Stephen Spear, 3rd place in Class C going into the final leg of the rally. In the classes outside the top 10, it will be 5th in Class E for David Peters and Roger Partridge. They lie in 11th place overall, just 4 seconds back from the top 10. Jeff Denford and Brian Sanford, meanwhile, take up 4th in Class C at this stage, lying in 12th overall and with 5 seconds to find if they wanted a podium in the class. Chris White and Jason Harris would have a very lucky escape. They crash into the bales on Stage 7. Luckily, though, they are able to continue. They lie in 3rd place in Class D. For Mark Butler and John Casey, it would be 5th place in Class C. They wouldn't be too far behind the class rivals, but they would only have 4 more stages to try and gain any time. Frustratingly, we'd lose Phil and David Garnett from Class B in the lead as well in Stage 5. They retire, going no further. So that means that it would be that lead for Derek Bly and Nigel Barnett, leading the way in Class B. But it almost wasn't the case. They too hit the bales on Stage 7, lucky to be able to continue with that lead. Phil Harris and Sean Leyland lie 2nd in Class A at this stage. They will be a minute behind the class lead, but were opening out a bigger advantage themselves. Matt Wheeler and Alex Hawkins, meanwhile, will be 2nd place in Class B. almost inheriting the lead when the new leaders hit the bales. But for now, they would have to settle for that second, with the final loop of stages to try and find a handful of more seconds. Third place in Class A would belong to Wayne Menenit and Michael Dennis at this stage in the event. They will be 40 seconds back from the Daihatsu ahead, so it was unlikely to change without issues for anyone at the top. And for Pete Coles and Sam Treleaven, it would be fourth place in Class A. They had 14 seconds to the car ahead, so it wasn't impossible, but it will be unlikely on these short stages they could make up that time on stage times alone without a mistake up ahead. And for David Thorpe and Ian Druitt, it will be third place in Class B. They have a good middle loop of the day lying in that place and 29th overall in that Citroën. And for Jay Thorne and Mark Veron, it will be fifth place in Class A. Their deficit in that position will be too big to make up in this final loop, so that's where they look set to remain, but they still have to make it to the end, of course. Adam Mayle and Steve Watts end this loop with fourth place in Class B, as well as 32nd on the leaderboard in that Proton. And for Paul and Richard Tappin, it will be a move to fifth in Class B, 34th on our leaderboard overall, and nice to see that sunbeam out. But rounding out the top of the class results would still be Joe Geach and Ben Ignazak, who now take fourth place in Class D. So we have just 4 stages remaining, and it's all changed in the podium positions, but the times were still close enough for that to change over the final 4 stages of the day. On to those final stages then, and sadly, we'd lose Joe Geach and Ben Ignazak when they retire in stage 11 of the event. So frustrating after a good run and so late on in the rally. And for Paul and Richard Tappin, it will be 5th place in Class B still, but they do manage to move up the results overall to take 33rd. It will be the same story for Adam Mayle and Steve Watts, moving up the results overall to take 31st, but their class position of 4th in Class B would remain the same. David Thorpe and Ian Druitt would finish just above the pair in the final stages of the day, taking the final step on the podium in Class B and 28th on our leaderboard. For Pete Coles and Sam Treleaven, it will be a 4th in class finish in Class A, a good result for the pair, who also take 22nd on that leaderboard. For Wayne Menenit and Michael Dennis, it will be a class podium. 3rd in Class A was theirs. They'd also take 21st overall. And it would also be a good result for Phil Harris and Sean Leyland as they take 2nd place in Class A at the end of the event, 18th on the leaderboard. It was a good weekend too for Matt Wheeler and Alex Hawkins. 2nd place in Class B was theirs, as well as 17th overall. And just ahead of them on the overall results were Derek Bly and Nigel Barnett. They get through the final loop and end the rally with a Class A victory. Kev and Ryan Harris round out the top of Class C in the final stages of the day with 5th place in the class and 15th overall. They finished just behind Mark Butler and Dion Casey, who finished 4th in the class, 14 seconds between the pair at the finish of the rally. For Chris White and Jason Harris, it will be 3rd in Class D. They get to the end without any more incidents and take that position as well as 13th on the overall leaderboard. Meanwhile, Jeff Denford and Brian Sanford just miss out on a top 10 finish. 11th overall was theirs. They also take 3rd place in Class C with that result. And rounding out the top 10 at the end of the rally was Sam Perring and Amy Fergus, 2nd in Class D for the pair in the BMW. For David Peters and Roger Partridge, it will be 5th place in Class E. They also take 9th place on the overall leaderboard. And it's a great weekend for Ed Lambert and Gareth Drayton, who take the Class A victory and with a good advantage in that position to also get a fantastic 8th place on the overall leaderboard, leading the front-wheel drive cars home. A small change for Graham Roberts and Bradley Down in the class sees them slip down to 4th position. They still get a good result though with 7th place on the leaderboard. They would though be beaten to that class podium position by Richard Barrow and Andrew Richards. third place in Class E, 6th overall. No change for Danielle Fursland and Holly Creamer. They reached the end of the rally with 5th place, taking 2nd in Class E. For Mike Raymond and Scott Smith, it will be 4th place on the leaderboard. That result also netting them 2nd in Class C in the escort. There's frustration though for Richard Fishley and Ian Edwards. There will be change in the final loop. They drop back down to 3rd place. Certainly not a bad result though, ending the rally with the podium overall and the Class C victory. So that does mean for Steve and Yvonne Fursland, it will be 2nd place. They get that position back in the final stages of the day. And although it wasn't the victory overall, the class win would be theirs. So that result, of course, means that it's victory today for Martin Waters and Ben Purnell at the Boconnoc stages. They take the overall win and the top spot in Class D. A perfect day all round for the BMW pair. So we reached the end of the rally and the results at the top of the leaderboard looked like this.